is the agenda for tonight. One thing you'll notice is the majority of the time we will spend on probably the election, the 7th CPA and the Queensland issues. This is probably the most important part of the reason that we're all here tonight. And as I said, any questions that come up about that, start thinking about them now and have them focused in your head so we can answer them as best as possible. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the National President, George Tambassis.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming to the member briefing tonight. And yes, I'm going to be really focused on some political stuff that I'd like to share with you tonight. Chris and the team have asked me to stay within a 10-minute window, so I'll do my best, because usually not only do I like talking with my hands, but I like to talk a lot. So my political discussion tonight will specifically be based on, I suppose, one of the most common questions we got recently, and that is what we focused on before the federal election, how we ended up where we are today, and I suppose what we did in between. So to start with, let's say before the election, we certainly focused on the fact, as did all the pundits out there, that there was a really, really high chance that the Labor Party would win the election. That's no surprise. Everyone was forecasting that, so were the pollsters. So we got as close as possible with the Labor Party. The Labor Party didn't have a fantastic relationship with the Guild for many, many years at a federal level, for obvious reasons, because they've been out of power for so long. Certainly since I've been National President, they lost the election, within that time frame, which was the handover between Cos and I. So we've always had great relations with the coalition, but we did take a fundamental or a specific decision to get as close as possible to the Labor Party, and that meant going to a lot of their events. We got to know them all, and as you know, on that fateful day, the federal election, there was this thing called a miracle that happened, that the coalition got back in. But I'll go back one more step. So just before the election was announced, a couple of weeks or so before the federal election, the coalition did surprise us with this so-called 60-day listing that you're very well aware of now. That was a PBAC, the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee recommendation that was put through prior to the budget, way prior to the budget. In actual fact, in August last year, they kept that really, really quiet all the way up to and including just before they printed those budget papers. And I can assure you, when they print those budget papers, it's in the budget. So they decided to put that so-called saving, and it would have been a huge saving for the government, when we basically had to reduce our GP or our profit margin on those 143 medicines that they were sort of pinpointing. 143 medicines dispensed, 2 for the price of 1, which specifically means in your pharmacies you would make half the profit. So we took the decision when we found out about this so-called government decision that was based on a PBAC recommendation, that we had to go pretty hard politically to reverse it. And let me tell you, from the night that we got the letter saying that that's what they wanted to do and what it put in the budget, we reversed that within 6 hours. That was before any of the ads that you saw in the newspapers, any of the editorials that I wrote in the pharmacy magazines, any message from George you got from me. That was reversed on the night that we got the decision from the government. And that was purely and simply political advocacy. And we don't usually use that political advocacy very often, but we knew full well that that particular decision would have cost you guys a fortune in your pharmacies. We've done some analysis now, but we know it would have been a mortal wound for many, many pharmacies. So we did that. Obviously, it upset the health minister when we asked him to reverse it. Obviously, we had some terse words with him, so to speak, but we stayed professional. He certainly did not want to reverse it on first request. He did not want to see our figures, nor did he want to share his figures, because keep in mind, because it was 2 or 3 weeks out of the budget, it was in the budgeting confidential sort of time frame where they couldn't share the numbers with us, and they certainly couldn't even share the PBAC recommendation with us, which was the 2 first questions we asked him. Share the numbers with us. How'd you come up with this decision? Share the clinical data as well. And it was no to both those answers. So we had no choice but to go political on him. He didn't obviously want to change that particular decision, so as you can imagine, only left us with one option, that was to go to the boss. So obviously, You know, the Prime Minister at the time, the Prime Minister today, was on our side, and so was the Treasurer, and we got that reversed. It's not very often that the Guild gets to reverse PBAC recommendations, and let me tell you, I've asked many, many people about PBAC recommendations, and I haven't found anyone that's been able to reverse one. So it's only a temporary victory, but a temporary victory is a victory nonetheless. So that's what we did before the election. That doesn't mean that we've now got sour relationships with the government. In my humble opinion, they respect us more because we stood up for what we believed in. That was duly and really, and any way you cut it, a really bad recommendation from PBAC. Not properly consulted with stakeholders like ourselves, not properly consulted with other clinical reference groups that they should have consulted. So we'll deal with that in the process now in the context of the negotiations in the 7 CPA, and Trent no doubt will talk about that. But I just want to put that into perspective for you. We haven't broken any relationships with the government nor the opposition. We're as close as we've ever been with both sides of politics, and we certainly have a great relationship with Greg now. I've spoken to him numerous occasions, face-to-face, over the phone, via text, via email, since he's got his job back. And, you know, politicians have got thick skin. Don't worry about what you hear in the media that the Guild may have a bad relationship with so-and-so, or we may have now terse relationships. That's not the case. They respect us, we respect them. We always stay professional, regardless of how unprofessional they unfortunately do get sometimes by not consulting us with these huge decisions. We still stay professional, and we were able to reverse that decision because we had the right team behind us. We were able to access people that could actually stay reasonable in a very tense and highly emotive situation, especially when you get a letter at 5:30 p.m. on a Thursday night, which is basically a government decision, and they want it to go live on the Department of Health website the next morning. Those 143 molecules would have been on the Department of Health's website the next morning if we hadn't reversed it. So that was very, very, that was a major issue for us, because once it went live, it was going to be very, very hard to reverse, because all the patient groups would have got involved, the doctors no doubt would have said their thing. So that was a decision that we made that night, to go as political as we could. And that's what we do at the Guild. We don't ask for thank yous, and sometimes we don't always get it right, but we need to go into bat for our members, and we know, and now that you know, that that was a horrible decision both financially and clinically to a certain degree, we know we did the right thing that night. But the relationship is still there. They still respect us. They know that we stand up for our rights. So I just wanted to make that really, really clear tonight.